Welcome to Invincible, our newest series. This is a series where we talk about how to create an invincible team, invincible teams, plural, within your organization, and ultimately an invincible organization. We're so glad you're joining us. With me, as always, is the co-host, Mike Oppedahl. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, and I'm good because I just got back from the most magical place on earth. So
Where would that be? What is the most magical place on earth, Mike?
they tell me it's Disney World. So I'm not sure if it's the most magical place when you have 6 kids under 12 in tow, but generally speaking, it's the most magical place on earth.
Yeah, well, at least the weather was cool, right? So there was a nice breeze there the whole time. How was the weather in Orlando, Florida this time of year?
Yeah, you're right. So I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they got 8.5 inches of snow the same day I was at Disney, and it was 90 plus degrees. So we're standing in line, dripping sweat. Everyone's walking around with their masks on, sweat everywhere. And you got, snow in Albuquerque and 90 plus degrees in Orlando.
Yeah, because the only thing worse than, pure humidity is wearing a mask outside and experiencing it at the same time. That's just lovely.
That's right. But hey, I will tell you what, I was impressed with the amount of work that they did to make it a safe environment. Like, they're really good. It's still the most magical place on earth. But if you got that mask down for more than a second, you're going to be told, right? So they do it in a loving way, but they're definitely bringing that high support, high challenge.
They are. I was at Universal Studios a couple of weeks ago, and whenever you take it down, you're allowed to take down your mask to eat or drink. But if you don't put it right back up, there's a guy on a megaphone saying, pull your mask back up only when you're taking a drink. So my hack was to have a straw that was in my mouth as long as I needed it to be.
There you go.
So that I could breathe for a second. I'm taking some long drinks here.
I love it. And probably because of the technology and the bands and stuff, they're probably like, Bronson, it's your mask. Like, they know exactly who you are. So
Exactly. No, it is a great experience. And I have to put in a plug for my favorite comedian, Jim Gaffigan. If you haven't seen his Dumbo skit, maybe just go to YouTube, type in Jim Gaffigan Dumbo. It's his retelling of a Disney experience that is, magical-ish. So, Mike, today we're talking about Invincible, and we'll go ahead and throw the first slide up here just so we can talk through it. Today, we're not going to get into a lot of details. It's not going to be in the weeds. It's going to be high-level, philosophical, the right mindset. Mike, what do we mean when we talk about an organization or teams within that organization being invincible? What do we mean by that?
Yeah, and you put the definition up, so I'll just say it's too powerful to be defeated or overcome. Our observation with the pandemic that hit us all, back in mid-March, at least in the U.S. and I know other parts of the world, our observation was there was lots of high-performing teams, lots of teams that were doing well in a decent economy that had been growing for quite some time, and we saw that a lot of those teams were able to be taken out because they lacked resilience or shield, right? Defense. And so oftentimes we love to talk about offense, right? We're doing this in sales and marketing, and we're doing this to get new clients, but we don't talk about what does it mean to truly be invincible to where something like a pandemic doesn't take us out.
No, that's absolutely right. I love the idea of the shield and the sword, the defense and the offense, right? And it's like if something happens like a pandemic or any other black swan event that you can't count on, you can't plan for, nobody knows about, for you to endure an event like that as an organization, you could endure it one of two ways, right? Or a third way, really. One, your offense could be so good, it doesn't matter how bad your defense is. Or your defense is so good that you lose no ground, even though you don't grow. Or you have a mix of both. Now, obviously, no one's pure offense and no one's pure defense. No one's pure shield. No one's pure sword. So it's going to be a mix. But if you don't have enough defense and enough offense, then certain events can take you out. You're not going to be invincible. And so this kind of leads us into what we call the invincible operating system. One of the things we want to do at Giant is to go into organizations and fortify them, give them defense, equip them, give them offense. We want to really make it so that when they've experienced Giant, they are invincible, and so they don't have to be taken out. Is it fair enough to say that's what we're all about when we go into these organizations, really trying to make them invincible?
It is, Bronson, because we found that the best leadership in the world brings high support and high challenge, truly fighting for the highest possible good of their people. And if we want our people to have sustainable jobs over time and to be able to enjoy the work they do, we've got to figure out how to be highly performing, highly offensive, right, and highly defensive, right, highly resilient. And so I think those things are important to be. And I think the other thing that I would say is, some companies are one team, right? You've got maybe a founder and a few people around, right? And that's one team, one flywheel, as we'd say. But really, really, really large organizations are really just a bunch of teams. It's a conglomerate of teams. And so we're not just after like, hey, at the highest level, like, hey, what does it mean? Like, here's the strategies and here's the ideas and here's the tactics. It's actually saying each of those teams really is a flywheel. And we have to figure out how do we get each team to be highly offensive and highly defensive at the same time.
Yeah, so you're saying if you want your organization to last, if you want your organization to withstand these difficult years, really you have to focus at the team level. You can't just fix the organization or fortify the organization. It's too big. There's too many moving parts.
Right.
But you can focus on this team of 15, that team of 12, this team of 20, that team of 7. If you get all of your teams to be invincible, then by definition, you have an invincible organization. And I think a lot of people don't get that. They don't make that shift mentally. They try to fix the organization by fixing the organization and wonder why they can't turn the Titanic. It's too difficult. You have to do little things that affect the whole. So one of the things we do at Giant is we have the Invincible operating system. This is our way of going in and actually having a plan. I would say this, and tell me if you agree. All organizations want to be invincible. If you were to ask an organization, do you want to be invincible? 100% of the chance, 100% of the time, yeah, I'd love to be invincible. But then if you ask them, do you have a plan? What would you typically hear as answers when you ask them, how are you going to do it?
No, I think it's a difficult question to answer, Bronson. I think you're right. I think most people would say, yeah, I want to be invincible. I want to have high performance and high resilience inside my company, inside my teams. But then what's your plan? How are you going to do it? How will you guarantee success? I mean, even when you ask me that question, Bronson, I go, man, we do this for a living. And it's still hard to answer, if I'm honest. And so I think it's this idea of instead of being accidental, being intentional. I don't think there's necessarily like a silver bullet out there. There's not like the plan, like everyone, if they just do this. But I think there are definitely some secrets, and that's what the Invincible operating system is. It's an intentional way to move towards invincible.
Absolutely. And that is so pivotal. It's a plan, right? Hope is not a plan. Right. You can't just hope to be invincible. You can't want it. Wanting something really badly, it's not enough. I mean, that's one of the things that I learned from watching sports. The teams want it really bad and they lose. Yeah. Like wanting something desperately does not mean you're going to get it. You could have the best intention and want something with every fiber of your being, and you still may not get there. Yeah. So what you have to have is a plan, a strategy, something you can actually implement to bridge the gap between your deep desire and the reality that is in front of you. And so we have something called the Invincible operating system. And I'm going to go to this next slide here because it's really 3 components. There's an assessment, a toolkit, and a process. These are the 3 components that make up the Invincible operating system. What we're going to do today is talk about these 3 components at a very high level. This is the last screen I'm going to share. We're not going to go in and show you features. We're not going to go in and show you details. We're not going to talk about where to click and how to, none of that. At a high level, philosophically, why is this plan to become invincible? So we say that it starts with an assessment. When we go into an organization, we're not interested in just starting to do things. We're interested in assessing their current reality. Mike, why is it important, first of all, that we assess their current reality? And then we'll get to the 5 things that we actually assess and why those matter. But why is just an assessment period so important?
For a couple of reasons. Number one, the assessment is a snapshot in time of what reality is. Guess what? If I did the assessment today and again in 60 days or 90 days, the results would change some. Like it's never the exact same. So number one, it just gives you a snapshot of what's our current reality. The second thing is 100% of the time when we review the assessment with a team, they're surprised. It's not always bad. They're not always like, oh, I thought we were way better. Sometimes they're like, wow, I had no idea our relationships were that good. Right? I had no idea that alignment was so high. So it's good or bad, but sometimes it's like, hey, we really thought we were good at executing and our team think we're horrible, right? So I think there's a couple things going on. Number one is you've got to get a benchmark of reality. And number two is you're going to be surprised by the results. But now you at least know what to do so that you can start working that plan intentionally, like we talked about, to improve those scores.
Yeah. And the alternative is, I think, what is the default? We don't assess the teams in our organization. And we have the desire to improve them. We want to have invincible organizations. So we just start doing stuff. And that could be anything. It may be, oh, I'm going to buy them a leadership book. Okay, that might work. I don't know. I don't know what their low scores are. I don't know the assessment. It might be, let's send them to a conference. That might help a little bit, but I don't know what was wrong with the team, so I don't know if that's the solution. It might be, I'm just going to have a stern talking to everybody.
Mhm.
Maybe. I don't know what they need. I don't know what the problems in your teams are. So you could say, I got a whole list of things I'm doing. And I would say that might be the best stuff ever. It might be a total colossal waste of time. I honestly don't know what you should do with your teams to become invincible if you're unwilling to assess them, right? And there's another great thing about the assessment. Not only is it getting a benchmark of current reality, imagine being a business leader. Imagine you're C-level, VP, executive, and being able to see all of your teams on one page. Imagine being able to see that's the health of that team, that's the health of that team, and you can actually have a numerical score attached to it. How important is that for leadership to be able to see the high-performing teams and the low-performing teams and know why they are scoring that way?
Yeah, Bronson, I love the example you gave because I'm telling you, so this is probably 2009, I was teaching a class on job readiness for junior achievement. And I remember there was a statistic that was in that class that said 92% of people are hired for resume and skills, but fired for a lack of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So teams and leaders and organizations have been asking for emotional intelligence and self-awareness training for a long time. Now, given the statistic, you might say, yeah, basically everyone needs that training. And that might be true. But rather than say, hey, let's assess what the team really needs, we just go, let's send everyone to emotional intelligence training. Let's get them the EQ book and let's make sure that everyone, well, what does that really mean? How is my emotional intelligence impacting this team? I actually have to assess what's going on with this specific team. It may be that some teams don't care as much about that score, right? So to your point, Bronson, we're really getting a very objective response from the team to say, this is the issue that's stopping us from becoming invincible.
Absolutely. And so when an organization uses Giant, they hire one of our experts. When we go in and start implementing the operating system, the first thing we do is assess the teams. So first we decide what are the teams, right? And that's even an exercise sometimes, is like who's on that team, who's on this team. And a person can be on more than one team. So we've built this so that it is really flexible with modern organizations. But then we assess the teams. I believe it's 70 questions. Is that accurate? Depending on how fast you take it, you could do it in 15 minutes, give or take, a little more, a little less. I take it pretty fast. So for me, it's probably about 15. For other people that overthink it, it might be closer to 30 minutes. But 30 minutes of investment with your people, and you have a snapshot of reality. Now, talk to us, Mike, about what that assessment is going to show us. It measures 5 areas. Each of those 5 are different and extremely important. What are the 5 areas that it measures?
Communication, relationships, alignment, execution, and capacity. So those are the key areas that we actually stumbled upon, as you know, Bronson. After years and years of working with teams around the world and doing these assessments, we found out those are the 5 key ingredients to highly effective teams. Now, the good news is that smart people like Google and Harvard have done these studies, and they've come out with really 5 key ingredients for highly effective teams, and they map directly to our assessment. But those are the areas that we find if you can get communication and relationships right, which is really psychological safety and trust for people on the team, that's the foundation for high performance. Then you look at alignment, let's get on the same page. Execution, can we get some stuff done? And then eventually you earn the right. I always say this, you got to get the first 4 right. It's not linear, but it kind of is. Because who cares about how much capacity you have if you have dysfunction and drama and broken relationships, you don't know what everyone's doing, and you can't get stuff done, right? So eventually you earn the right to look at capacity to say, okay, now that we have a healthy team, how do we create more capacity to get more done with the same resources?
Yeah, I love that. And the assessment, it's a little bit counterintuitive. You would think if you were to ask a business leader off the street, what leads to a high-performing team, you would get answers like this. Having A players, just having brilliant people that are driven and are workaholics. That's how you have a high performing team. Or it's pedigree. Well, you got to hire from Harvard and Yale. If you get your MBAs from there, then everything else works out, right? You would think it's just talent or something closely related to talent. You wouldn't hear relationships. We think relationships is really important. Like that's not the top of the list of a lot of people, right? You wouldn't hear things like alignment. Really, it's being aligned, being on the same page. But Google spent millions of dollars to discover that our assessment is really what matters. That our assessment maps closely to their assessment, and that the things that drive high-performing teams is not the things you think it might be. Here's why that's such an important fact. Because the things that we measure are things that normal mortals can improve. You can improve your relationships without being brilliant. You can improve your communication without being from Harvard. You can improve your alignment without, having some experience that makes you special or different or having some superpower. Anyone can improve the 5 things that we really assess. And those 5 things do drive the health of a team. And so when you see these scores, you're not going to be put in a situation where, wow, I have to improve something I can't improve. Mm-hmm. You can improve everything that the scores are going to show you that is current reality today. So it's a hopeful process. You can move forward on all these things. So that's the assessment. That's step 1. If you don't start with an assessment, you may have good intentions, but your effectiveness will be accidental at best. Mm-hmm. You have to have a benchmark of reality. So now you know the scores. Let's say they've taken our advice and they've used our assessment. We want to improve those scores. You transform people by transforming their thinking, right? I mean, the mind is the only way possible you're going to get those scores to be different. You can't physically grab their hands and make them hit buttons differently or move their mouth physically. The only thing you can ever do is infiltrate their mind, make them think differently, then they behave differently, then their team is different and improved. Why do we use a toolkit to transform their thinking as opposed to other methods?
Yeah, and I think I want to answer something first, which is you said, okay, there's actually a hopeful process, which is we've assessed, now we're actually going to improve. Well, how do we do that? Well, we give you tools to improve each of those scores. So it's not just okay, we've assessed, now let's go read some books or let's get some audios going. It's like, no, we give them tools to go and implement on a daily basis. Like you said, Bronson, we all have unconscious bias towards all of those things. You might think of relationships as very different than I do. I know, Bronson, you're a very independent person. You get a lot done on your own. You have a brilliant mind. You might say, I'm not sure relationships are as important as Mike might think so. But in the end, we all have to agree that without healthy relationships, the team won't be at the highest level. So then we give tools that are practical, they're simple, they're visual, and they're memorable. So I don't have to go, man, what do I do? I've listened to this 30-minute audio about how to improve my relationships, and I'm just going to go to Bronson and hope that he likes me better. I go, no, there's a tool called Support and Challenge, and it's a simple matrix. And he'll never forget it. So I go, you know what? I've brought a lot of challenge to Bronson, but I've not been good at bringing him support. But if you use this tool with Support and Challenge, I can actually improve the relationship we have based on a simple visual tool and a common language that we both agree. So simple, practical tools mapped to the scores that give you results.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the things we talk about is how little people actually retain of the information they come into contact with. And as kind of a joke, I like to ask people what their degree is in. And then whatever it is, I ask them, could you give me 10 facts about that degree? Do you remember 10 deep ideas from that degree? Could we have a conversation about those ideas? And the reality is they crammed for a test, they got the score, and then they forgot the information because they were retaining it for a moment in time for a reason. They weren't retaining it to be forever transformed, right? We don't remember what we ate for breakfast this morning. We don't remember, how many stoplights were on the way to work this morning. If I said, don't look at your shirt right now, can you remember what you're wearing? You may not remember what clothes you have on without looking right now. If somebody gets on a stage and lectures for an hour, ask me in a week what they said, you're just not going to remember it, right? Even though it was a mnemonic. But remember, every part of it started with it was A and then a B and then a C. It was this great mnemonic and it was super clever. Yeah, a week from now, it doesn't stick, right? Neurolinguistics is really the backbone of our toolkit. So there's over 60 visual tools, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. You'll remember this visual tool far easier than you can remember verbatim chapters of a book, because that's not realistic unless you're a savant. But you can remember a simple matrix. You can remember a diagram. You can remember a kid's version of a drawing with a really deep insight. And then you can use that toolkit in every conversation, every interaction, every moment throughout the day. It's not just a random event. It's now a part of you, because tools can become a part of you. The lecture never will. And so the assessment with the toolkit is really powerful, because now you have current reality and a way to transform your thinking if you learn those tools. Anything else to add about the toolkit, Mike?
just one experience from last week. I was working with a team, as you know, on looking through their scores. They were surprised, like everyone else, about certain scores. But there was one tool we covered during our time together. It's simply called discretion and discipline. 2 words, right? It has 3 icons. It says what to share, when to share it, and who to share it with. It's that simple. We ended a half-day session on Thursday. Friday morning, one of the VPs had a meeting with one of her direct reports before our time together. She came to the meeting and her jaw was on the floor. She goes, I remember discretion and discipline. I used it with my direct report, and it transformed the entire conversation. That was the most important thing from yesterday. And I'm like, Bronson, that's a little humbling for me because I spent a half day with them going through like a lot of stuff. And I think I said a lot of really brilliant things, like you said, from a stage. But the reality was she remembered a simple tool with 3 diagrams on it. So again, just a quick example of how powerful these things can be if we put them into practice.
Yeah, and we won't name drop the name, but this was a publicly traded company. I mean, this is a huge company. I think they're public. Are they private?
No, they're actually the largest private company, I believe, in their industry.
That's why I was confused because they're so big as a private company.
They basically are the Goliath in their industry, and I guarantee all of you have used their services before. But the point is that one simple tool transformed a leader's thinking, to your point, rather than all these brilliant things. Now, I know better that she wasn't going to listen to everything I said, but that simple visual changed her meeting.
And so Ashley has a question here, which actually segues perfectly to the process piece.
It does.
She says, if I use this system, how much time per week would I expect to spend using these tools with our team? So that is the perfect question to ask, Ashley, because there's actually still a gap. You may think, well, we had the assessment, and so we know current reality, and we have the tools, so we know how to actually improve those scores. Therefore, we're done. But now you need a process. The process is going to tell you who to get with, when to get with them, how to teach the tools so that everyone has the right experience at the right time to actually improve the scores. Because think about it, philosophically, if I tell you your scores are X and then I give you a bunch of tools, if you don't do anything with those tools, nothing changes. Right. We know the assessment and we have the tools, but the gap is still there because you have to know how to implement the tools. And so, Mike, we have a process. Walk us through the process, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the parts of it and why they're so important. What is the process of the Invincible operating system?
Yeah, and I know we'll go through this in the future, so you can picture a little visual, but there's something to do weekly. There's something to do monthly with the leader. There's something to do monthly with the team. There's something to do quarterly, and there's something to do annually. So very simply, right, most processes you've seen in your life that work or have some sort of a cadence to them, and there's some sort of intentionality behind it. But you want to do weekly training. You want to work with the leader once a month. You want to work with the team once a month. The team assesses the reality again once a quarter, and then once a year we back up to the highest level and look at people across the organization, and we do something really intentional. But that's it, very simply in a nutshell.
Yeah, and there's actually a reason. Like, I could have put up the visual, and I was thinking about, should I put up the visual for this talk? I didn't want to. Yep. It's so simple. I just want you to hear it, right? Yep. It's just a weekly thing, a couple monthly things, a quarterly thing, a yearly thing, call it good. Yep. It's just a rhythm. It's simple, right? It's not this convoluted plan. It's not a Gantt chart. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out when does that happen and who has to do that and what are the dependencies here and there? No, it's just simple. So let's break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
We want individuals throughout the organization to do a self-guided exercise once a week. It could be a short little video they watch. It's just kind of a mindset, just getting their thinking right. So we want everyone in the organization to do something every week on their own. Simple. That's all it is, right? And there can be different things they do on their own. Once a month, we want to get with the leaders. It's just that simple, right? However many leaders you got 10 leaders, great. Let's get with them once a month. Maybe we get with them all together. Maybe we get with them one-on-one. There's lots of ways to do it. But we just want to get with the leadership once a month to be able to talk about maybe the difficult issues they're dealing with, to be able to help them have some tools to work through some situations, to help prepare them for the team experience that's also going to happen that month. So individuals do something every week. We get with leaders once a month. We get with teams once a month. And so we go through an experience with teams once a month to really help them learn a tool that is going to improve their score. Right. And then, like you said, every quarter we retake the assessment because the assessment changes. It improves over time. So you want to retake it and see how it's improved or see if things have slipped that we need to start focusing on. Right. So you take the assessment, and then there's a few other, annual things we do, but it's just that simple. It's a way for everyone to be involved in the process. There's something for every employee to do. There's something for leaders to do. There's something for teams to do. And so to answer Ashley's question, if somebody were to say, how much time does it take? Well, as an individual, if you really do an exercise every week, the training you do on the platform every week, it could be as quick as 5 minutes a week. It could be as long as 30 minutes to an hour a week. So you're going to spend between 20 minutes to a couple hours a month as an individual. Is that fair, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it could be as simple as 5 minutes. It could be as much as 30. But the reality is, on a weekly basis, you can expect to have at least 5 minutes, that repeatable, almost like a daily or weekly dose, just to make sure we're getting that thinking transformed, right? That's the idea. But then maybe you're in one experience a month. So as an individual, you might be in 5 minutes a week and then an hour, once a month. So it's really simple, right?
That's it. And then the leader, you add a little bit more time to that. They're leaders. I mean, they're vested in learning this stuff at a little deeper level. So they add on an extra hour a month for them because they're doing that one-on-one coaching, right? So we're talking a few hours a month, no matter who you are. It is an investment. So I'm not going to act like it isn't an investment. We're all very busy. You do have to invest some time. But for the payoff, the investment is a joke. I mean, if I can be frank for a minute, the amount to put in a couple hours and to have better leaders and an improved culture and increased productivity and have higher scores on all 5 things in the flywheel, I think it's worth a couple hours a month from people in the organization. So Jacob has a question here. He says, I'm a team leader. I can't get our upper management to invest the money or time on things like this. Is this something I can just do with my small team, or does it take the entire company? What an incredible question. Mike, what do you think? Can you do this with one team, or do you got to buy in with the whole org?
I have great news for Jacob. So I have no idea how large your organization is, Jacob, and you can let us know if you'd like, but this can be done with a single team. So of course, the more teams in the organization that are going through the Invincible operating system, the better you're going to see the entire culture be transformed, right? The entire productivity go up, a bunch of better leaders. But Jacob, we have tons of teams that do this where they say, hey, I found Giant. I went through some process. This transformed my thinking. I saw the benefit. So I'm going to use my P&L, whatever that looks like, to invest a little bit of time and a little bit of money in my team. And the reality is, Jacob, it's really easy and really low cost to run for a single team. If I'm honest, it's not much more for an entire organization, but obviously there's a conversation of how many teams, how many people. But for you, Jacob, you could honestly start. I don't know if we want to throw up the link, Bronson, but really just start the Invincible process with your team today. And as a matter of fact, the first 30 days, you can take the assessment. You can start using the tools. It's completely free. There you go, giant.tv/bootcamp. So go there, Jacob. But yeah, Bronson, to that point, we have had many, many large organizations where we started in one department. We started with just HR or just the sales team, or just the product team. And we didn't have to try to worry about that big lift of getting consensus buy-in across the entire company.
Absolutely. The minimum number of people you could have on a team is 2. You can have 2, and that's a team, right? And you're going to have a score, and it's going to surprise you, and you can improve it, and it's meaningful data, and you're going to learn the toolkit, and it's going to improve your thinking, and there's going to be a process. 2 people. You could have 2 million people, because we're not dealing with 2 million people all at once. 2 million people is really just broken into teams, right? So however small, however large your organization is, you absolutely can. And we made it so that you can easily roll in more teams as you go. So you can start with a team, and you can add another one. You can add third, fourth. You can really grow into it as you need to and test it out. The really great thing about the link that's on the screen right now, if you go to giant.tv/bootcamp, we're really big fans of just providing value so that you can see the transformation before you have to invest any more time or money, right? Okay. We're not asking for a contract and a bunch of money, and then we show up and under-deliver, and now you're stuck in some long-term contract and you don't like what's happening. So we've decided that we're going to give you a free experience. So if you go to giant.tv/bootcamp, it's going to tell you exactly what to do so that you could have your team have a free experience with one of our experts. And that free experience is going to be a 5 voices bootcamp. So that your team members are going to learn their leadership voice. They're going to learn their nemesis voice. They're going to learn which other people on the team are their nemesis voices. And it's probably going to be extremely illuminating in terms of dynamics on the team. You're going to realize that's why those 2 people don't see eye to eye. That's why these people are always in agreement. That's why this feels like a click over here. That's how we need to communicate to that person in their language because of the way they see the world. They're not broken. They're just different. And you're going to have so many insights when this boot camp is over that you're probably going to consider implementing the operating system, because the operating system is the boot camp on steroids and never ending. It's a continual process to help that kind of insight be ever present inside your organization. So I love that question. So Mike, as you think about the Invincible operating system, right? How big of a deal is it? You zoom back 30,000 foot. You take, let's say there's a corporation. Let's imagine two versions of their future. There's version A, where they ignore everything that you and I just said, and they don't assess. They don't have visual tools. They don't have a process. They might have good intention and they might work really hard, but they don't buy into the Invincible operating system. And that same company, that same organization has another version of their future where they say, you know what? This sounds about as smart as any leadership thing I've ever heard. This sounds about as good as any people development thing I've experienced. It's worth a shot. And they actually implement it en masse. Talk to me about the difference in those two trajectories for an organization based on what you've seen in the field and what happens when you run the operating system with an organization.
Yeah, and I'll start with I have lots of calls with leaders around the world, as you know, on a weekly basis. And here's what I hear from people who aren't doing something intentional like the Invincible operating system. They talk about drama, hurt relationships, misalignment, missed opportunities, and just a lack of overall ability to get things done. I mean, that's what I hear over and over and over again. No system, no process. People aren't being developed. We need to build our bench. These are the things I hear on a weekly basis. The folks who actually do something intentional and potentially take the dive and say, hey, we're going to become invincible. We're going to do an assessment. We're going to do a toolkit. And we're going to have a process. I hear, more alignment. I hear no drama. We got rid of drama and gossip, right? Using go to the source. We hear things like we have more opportunities. Our relationships are much better. We have a healthier culture. People like coming to work. We actually enjoy each other. We actually like being around one another. We had the leaders completely changed the way they lead. We actually like being a part of the team now. Like those are the things, those are success stories. Those are the testimonials I hear from folks who decide to take the dive. And the other folks are going, hey, it's like you said earlier, hope is not a strategy. If we just hope that drama will go away or gossip or misalignment or we could get more things done, if we just hope on those things, it won't happen. But taking one small intentional step, you can see an infinite ROI in just the intentionality of going for it.
Absolutely. And if I could even say something, it's so hard to put into words what the Giant experience is like. We're so jaded and we're so numb to another workshop, another class, another leadership thing, another development thing. I think we've been kind of inundated with this kind of talk for going on 30, 40 years now, right? Is that we're kind of numb to it. And so we get lumped together with that stuff. Oh, it's just development. It's just like fill in the blank guru, right? I like to say one of our unwritten taglines is we show up and make people cry, right? We show up and it's deep. I mean, however deep you think it is, it's a little bit deeper, right? We show up and you might be doing it to fix your team and then you end up getting fixed.
Yep.
You might be doing it because that other person's a knucklehead and then you realize you got a lot of growth opportunity yourself and that there's some stuff you've been carrying around and there's some stuff you got to deal with and there's some behaviors that are really unhealthy that used to be what leadership is and it's not. And you have to let go of those things. And you actually can have your own breakthrough when it wasn't even the plan. And there's other people in your team, and they might be in tears because of your breakthroughs. They might be in tears because of what you realize about your leadership. And they might be in tears about what they realize about each other, and that they're not enemies. They're just different, or they just didn't have the tools to actually address the issues in front of them. They wanted to address them. They had good hearts. They had good intention, but they didn't have the actual skill set, the actual tools to make things better despite their good intentions. And so when we go into an organization and we present a real plan, a real operating system that goes from assessment to toolkit to process, the breakthrough is unlike whatever counterpart to this you're probably imagining right now. It's just different. And that's why we want to do a free boot camp, because it's going to illuminate that in a way that me saying it right now just can't. You experiencing it is really the best way to do it. So Mike, final word to you. How would you sum up this whole thing, or what final thoughts do you want to leave with us?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm going to pile into what you just said, because the people watching this show probably haven't heard my story, which is I was a client of Giant. I was running a healthcare company in Albuquerque, New Mexico with a couple hundred employees, and I was looking to change my leadership. And I went to, like you said, Bronson, just another retreat, just another thing from some gurus. And the fact is, I walked away with some powerful insights about myself. I walked away looking at some of my self-preservation. I looked at some really deep things in my leadership. And again, the rest of that story is I started changing at work, and it benefited my company greatly. But the reality is, I realized as a guardian pioneer that I was dominating my son. I realized as guardian pioneer, I was getting so much done outside the home that I wasn't being present with my wife and I wasn't leading my family. So it's crazy because you're talking about, hey, however deep you think it is, it goes deeper. My own experience was one that I went out to fix my leadership in my company and came back and solved a lot of things that helped me live a way better life, holistic life, not just at work. It worked at work and it was great. But I saw the results immediately in myself and my family. And I was like, man, this stuff is powerful. So that's kind of my final word for those who don't know my story. That's really my story. I left my company and joined these guys to see this happen all over the world because it liberates and transforms every person who does it. And it makes teams and companies invincible.
That's great. What an incredible final word. Your story is always inspiring to me. We have on the screen here. Thanks for joining, everyone. Come back next Thursday at the same time, 11:30 Eastern. And don't forget to get your free bootcamp, giant.tv/bootcamp. Mike, have a great week. We will talk soon.
All right. See you guys next week. Come back.